Record. Welcome, friends, to this episode of the Sync Your Life podcast. Today, I'm joined by my friend Brad Bishop. Brad and I connected through mutual business experiences a few years ago and got to know each other. And it turns out we had a lot in common because he too has 2 adopted children and has a transracial family. So since we're featuring adoption this month, I wanted him to be one of the guests on the show just to share his journey and his experience. I know that there have been some ups and downs and a roller coaster of emotion as a lot of us experience when we're going through adoption. And so as promised to you guys, I wanted to make sure that we cover all of our bases this month. I want you guys to come out of this month of November, National Adoption Month, feeling more confident in understanding what's entailed in an adoption process, what you can really be looking to expect, and also what you can not expect, things that can kind of come at you from left field that you're not expecting. So it's all about preparedness. And I'm speaking directly to the couple or the person who's looking to adopt or think it might be part of their future, or to the family who has an adopted child who just wants to make sure that they're doing the best that they can for that child. So without further ado, I'm excited to welcome Brad to the show. So we'll just kick things off with Brad, if you want to just share with people who you are day to day, who is Brad, and we'll go from there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. And actually, I want to say this because you mentioned transracial. We are transracial, and I've been trying to find resources that would be helpful to us. So if you have anything, please let me know. Books, courses, anything you can think of, I'm open to it. So yeah, my name is Brad Bishop, and we have 2 adopted babies. I have a 2-year-old, I have a 1-year-old, both boys, full brothers. They are 355 days apart. So for 10 days every year, they're the same age, which is a lot of fun. My wife and I tried for 8 years to get pregnant, and we did 4 rounds of in vitro over 4 years, or I'm sorry, over 8 years. And obviously it did not work. And towards the end of those 8 years, we just started looking at other options and started pursuing adoption. And, like our adoption process was there's so many wonderful ups and so many downs. Obviously ended in 2 beautiful babies, which I'm so very thankful for. But happy to walk through that process today and help. I've always just wanted to help any couple once they go through this. And the only way I can do that, honestly, is just being honest about what we went through and prepare you for some of the challenges you're going to face. But hopefully it ends with something beautiful for your listeners, and that's a baby.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know that very similar to you, we both adopted our first child. I'd love for you to hear, I'd love for our audience to hear from you, sort of, what did that journey look like? Did you actually hire an agency, an
Yeah.
attorney? Like, how did that start? And what was that like from
Yeah.
an emotional perspective?
Oh my gosh. Ours was really interesting. So we spent, I'm trying to think, probably a year and a half looking at different agencies. And I'm going to be honest with you, we had a lot of problems. So the first agency we went to, they were great. We loved them. They're local. So I live in Oklahoma City. There's a local agency we'd heard great things about. And they came over to the house to do the home study. And at the time, we had this little elderly miniature schnauzer, and elderly miniature schnauzers are like senile old people. They get very angry. And my little dog bit the lady on the home study, and it wasn't enough to break the skin. Like, he literally just nipped at her. That was it. Like, that they said absolutely not. We're not moving forward. I was like, oh my gosh, like, come on. He's like 14 years old. Please, I've had this dog since he was a puppy. Nope, not moving forward. And then we had another agency so behind our backyard, we have a neighborhood pond, and my backyard is completely fenced in. And they came over and they did not like the pond. They hated the water. And they asked if we would put a second fence in our backyard. So we'd have 2 fences in our backyard. And we said, no, like, that would not help for resale value of our home. And we don't want to block our view of our pond. That's why we bought the house, was the view. And they said, well, okay, well, could you put a second deadbolt on the door that's up a little higher so the kids can't reach it? We said, absolutely. That's so easy to do. It was funny. As soon as I said that, they switched it around on me, and they said, well, what if there's a fire in the house and you and your wife are incapacitated and the kids are so little they can't open that deadbolt? I was like, what? You just told me to put a deadbolt on there. It's easy to do. I'm happy to do it. And they completely flipped that on me. And it was just so weird. I don't know. It was just a weird feeling. And we didn't have one with them. And then some friends of ours had mentioned oh no, let me back up. We went we went with another agency, and we they had great reviews. And during the process of them kind of learning about us, like, when social workers or their caseworkers meet with you, they separated my wife and I for, like, I don't know, maybe 1 to 2 hours each, just to talk about our upbringing, which I don't mind being separated. I mean, my wife and I have heard each other's story a million times, so that didn't bother me. So my wife did hers, and my wife's dad died when she was 7 years old. And at the time we were going through this, she was probably 32. And they met her for 2 hours. And then the week before Christmas, they came back and called and said that they did not think she would be a good mother, because when they asked her questions about her father death when she was 7 years old, she couldn't remember many details about it. And she didn't make enough eye contact when they asked about it.
Wow.
And they used that as justification to say she would not be a good mother. The week before Christmas, I was livid.
Yeah.
I'm just like, you don't even know my wife. Like, you got all these references for her from other people that know her. Why don't you call those people and see what they think? We babysat our friends' children. Talk to those parents and see how she is.
Mhm.
And it was just bizarre. And
Yeah.
I'm over there going, well, my mom died when I was 24, and I'm 40 now. But I said, I don't remember a lot of the details from then. I mean, that's just that's time, like, enough time has gone by that, like, my memory is fading on certain things. And so why didn't you hold me accountable then for saying I don't remember things? But they didn't. I don't know why that. My wife is just quiet by nature. And so they said she was, I don't know, practicing some, like some type of, I don't forget what they called it, but basically they just thought she would be a distant mother because she couldn't
Mhm.
remember details of her dad's death when she was 7 years old, which is just asinine to me.
Mhm.
Um, so we didn't go with them. We were just having a horrible experience with
Yeah.
agencies. And some friends of ours had recently started the process, and they went through an adoption consultant, which I did not know was a thing, never heard of it before. But for the listeners out here that may not have heard of that, so you have adoption agencies that you can work with, and they bring in they find birth moms that they work with, and you have access to those birth moms. Consultants are kind of one person bands that basically consult with other agencies around the country. So the consultants also bring in birth moms that they have that contract with them, but they also are sending your profile to agencies all around the country. Maybe you have a match with their birth moms as well. So I think it actually widens your net a little bit. And so we had
Mhm.
a consultant. She was fantastic. Here's what's crazy about that is any consultant is just going to tell you, that, hey, like, don't get your hopes up, like, for something right away. It generally takes about a year to get matched. I mean, that's just like standard language.
Mhm.
We got matched with our birth mother on day one.
Wow. I didn't realize it was day
Yeah,
one.
day one. And honestly, our check was in the mail. So I'm not even sure if it truly counts as day one. And here's what's interesting is we've gone through this super low period for 8 years. We'd reached the point where we were even wondering if we should even keep pursuing this. It's just like we've got 8 years. Like, I'm getting close to 40. Like, let's just let's just be the funny aunt and uncle, and we'll just live our lives. And maybe this just isn't for us. And then we
Mhm.
get matched on day one. I mean, it's crazy. I was even when she called us up later that day and said, "Okay, I got a birth mom that matches everything, all the boxes you guys checked." And I went to my wife and I said, I don't know about this. I'm super scared. Like, maybe we should just dip our toes into this. This seems like it's moving a little fast." And my wife said, "Yeah." So I was fine to say, "Hey, why don't we just, like, okay, now we've seen how it works, so let's just now we'll be ready for the next one." And my
Now we'll
wife
think
said,
about
"Brad."
it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. My wife said, "Brad, we've been waiting 8 years. Why would we put this off anymore?" And she was completely right. And so we said, absolutely, throw our name in the ring. And from what I understand, they gave our birth mom 5 profiles to look at. And so this was so day one, we found out we there's a birth mom that meets our criteria, and she gave birth mom our profile. Day two, 8:30 in the morning, I get a call saying out of all the five, she picked us. And at noon that day, I needed to be on a phone call to meet birth mom for the first time. I mean, talk about a whirlwind experience.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and this was in June of 2020, and our son was born in September. of 2020.
Mhm.
So 8 years of in vitro and just really bad experience with agencies. And not that agencies are bad, it's just we had a bad experience. I don't want to put that because I've had friends that have used agencies that had a wonderful experience. For whatever reason, it just wasn't for us.
Yeah.
And so yeah, our son was born in September of 2020, and he is now 2 years old. And I'll fast forward a little bit, but when our son was about 5 to 6 months old, birth mom contacted us and said she was pregnant again and asked
Mhm.
if we would consider taking another. And we said absolutely. We wanted to keep the brothers together. And in September of 21, my second son was born.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But
And
we
since
have
then,
we have a lot of ground to cover though. So
I
between
know.
those two, because
There's a lot. There's a lot.
yeah, there's a lot here. So I want to unpack
Yeah,
some of what
yeah,
you've already said,
yeah,
which is,
yeah.
so I want to know, like, especially for the listeners here, like what, um, when you were first matched and you met with the birth mother the first time, what was that like? And then how was that relationship? I know, because a lot of people don't realize
Yeah.
you're really sort of starting and cultivating a relationship once you get matched, right? And so you're
Right.
forming this relationship with birth mother up until the child is born and then beyond in a lot of cases too. So I'd love for you to sort of share, like, from June to September, like what was
Yeah.
that journey like?
Yeah. Meeting birth mom for the first time. Now, so I should preface this by saying that our birth mom is in a different state from us. And we did not meet via Zoom. It was just a phone call. So I could not see her face. Um, it was awkward. I'm not gonna lie, it was awkward because it's just I don't know this person and they're giving me their child. It's just what an awkward experience. And I remember we were asking our consultant, we're like, what do we say? Like, what are we supposed to say to her? And she guided us through that and made it. And she was on the call too, so that helped. She guided that whole call. But what was really sweet was we had heard from an agency, gosh, maybe 8 months prior, that my wife would not be a good mom because of her dad's death. And when we asked birth mom, we said, why did you pick us out of all the profiles? She said, when I saw the pictures of Kelsey, my wife, I just knew she would be a good mom.
Hmm.
And for that validation, I think Kelsey needed to hear that. And
Yeah.
it was emotional. It was an emotional phone call. It was, looking back, it was probably a 10-minute call. It was super short. She just wanted to hear our voice and hear why we wanted to do this. And um, it was a neat experience for the despite the awkwardness of the situation, obviously.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, it was so after that, what happens is so birth mom had I don't know what number it was. There wherever she lives in Arizona, and she basically found a phone number for like a hotline of some kind that got her connected to a different adoption consultant out of a different state. So she had a consultant and we had a consultant, and her consultant had just kind of put her paperwork out there to all of her other consultant friends, which landed on the desk of our consultant. And that's how that match was made. So
Hmm.
once birth mom chose us right after that phone call, I want to say it was in like an hour, she had officially decided after meeting us, yes, I'm moving forward with Brad and Kelsey. So then what happens is her consultant then will set up, introduce us to attorneys in birth mom's home state, that so we can meet that attorney and make sure that's who we want to work with. At
Hmm.
that point, our consultant, her job is pretty much done. I mean, she made the match. That's what we hired her to do. So she kind of faded into the background and just said, hey, I'm here for any questions you guys have. I mean, signed a year contract with her. She already
Hmm.
did the bulk of her job already, but she's there to answer our questions. So she kind of faded into the background. We primarily started working with birth mom as a consultant, and she handed us off to an attorney. Now, um, what's interesting about that is like when you're doing, adoption across different states, you're going to have an attorney in your home state where you live that's helping things, because there's the whole ICPC stuff, which I'm not even going to pretend to understand ICPC and all its legality, but essentially you have an attorney in your home state, then there's an attorney for birth mom. Those attorneys work together. Um, we came in agreement with our attorney. It was so interesting because he was like, well, do you want like the Cadillac package, or do you just want like the regular package? I don't know what that means. And so he basically just said the Cadillac means that he's handling all the expenses. So every state has different requirements in terms of what you can spend out of pocket for birth mom's expenses. From what I understand, and I may be wrong about this, but from what I was told, like for example, in the state of Oklahoma where I live, you can only pay like $1,000 out of pocket max for birth mom's expenses. Now, when I say birth mom expenses, I'm referring to, you know,
Living
utility,
expenses.
yeah,
Mhm.
living, food, living, utilities, cell phone, all that stuff. From what I understand, in Oklahoma, we're only $1,000. In Arizona, it's it's pretty much uncapped. It's just whatever is deemed reasonable by a court. I don't know how legit that is. I truly
Yeah.
don't know because there were some expenses that I was like, I don't know about that. Because they would
Mhm.
so at first we thought, "Hey, we're gonna save money here and we'll handle the expenses." Don't ever do that. Don't ever do that. Because what happens is you are now putting yourself in a position to deny birth moms something. And
Mhm.
as the adoptive family, you don't want to be that role to birth mom. You want to be the just that loving family that's taking her child, not the person that's telling her she can't have a cell phone or whatever. And
Right.
so
Right.
we gave up that power very quickly
Mhm.
because she was and we really didn't talk to her much after that first phone call. Everything was done via text. Um and every birth mom's different. It wasn't like that was the rule. It was just that's how she preferred to communicate.
Yeah.
Well, she had a lot of needs. And so we were starting to get a lot of texts like, "Hey, I need this, I need this, I need that, I need that." And very quickly we're like, "Okay, we're not doing this." And it
Mhm.
was a weird living situation like that I also don't recommend. So she was living with birth father and relatives of birth father offered them a rent house. And it was just because of that family dynamic there, it made some things awkward a little bit. And
Awkward.
so
Yeah.
I don't recommend that. Um
Mhm.
our attorney was really nice, but I hate saying this, but he was a little lazy. I'm gonna be honest with you.
Mhm.
He didn't want to do a lot of the legwork. And so,
Mhm.
like for instance, birth the thing is like you have these two attorneys that your experience may be different, honestly, but from what I thought they're kind of supposed to shield us from a lot of this stuff. And our social worker on the ground that was working with birth mom in Arizona, she told us that. She said, "Hey, the attorney should shield you from a lot of the drama or a lot of the issues. You should basically just be sending attorney a monthly check, and that is your involvement. You send a check. You don't even need to know where you shouldn't have to know where it goes or what she uses it for. Just know that we're taking care of it." That's how it should
Right.
have been. Ours was not that way. We were getting calls that was like, her air conditioner's out. And I thought, well, why? I don't understand why you're calling me. Like that seems like a landlord issue. So
Right.
I would call the landlord. But no, but then they're telling me, Brad, just keep her happy and buy an air conditioner. I was like, well, that
Right.
doesn't seem uh, I don't know, right. So I bought her an air conditioner. I bought her a window unit from Home Depot. And the social worker took it over to her house and installed it and she was happy. It was
Yeah.
just little things like that that I didn't want to be involved with. But
Yeah, and you're right, it is, and I just wanna mention too, that it is
yeah,
different, like, state to state,
yeah,
like, every
completely.
because I know and our attorney had told us in the beginning that, like, with the language that he used was that there are some states that are more adoption friendly. And so that has to do with not only the ICPC and how a baby might be transferred from one state to its new home state, but it also has to do with this type of thing, like the birth mother
Right.
expenses and how the relationship is handled and connected. I mean, we had a similar experience with my oldest. She was born in another state as well. So we had to stay in that state for, I think it ended up being about 7 days. Sometimes
Mhm.
it can be 2 or 3 weeks, depending on how long the ICPC takes. Um, but because of those two different states, you kind of have to find a middle ground between like, well, what does my home state say versus her home state say? And I totally agree with you that like the less drama involved, the better, right? And so the more you can put on, and we did that too. We pushed back a little bit on the attorneys. Like we understood if there were living expenses that were requested and that couldn't be handled. Um, but we didn't have that drama that you had of like a cell phone or an air conditioning unit or those types of things. So
Right.
that kind of goes back to like, I mean, every experience is different, right? Like the
Right.
attorney that you use or the agency that you use or whatever, it's different for everyone. So that's
We
interesting.
had
So, oh yeah,
I
go
was gonna
ahead.
say we had an incredible social worker. She dotted her I's and crossed her T's. There was one time where mom texted all of us said, "Hey, her cell phone's broken. She needs a new cell phone." Well, cell phones are expensive. And one, I'm not anywhere near birth mom, so I hate to say this about my child's birth mom, but I don't know this person. Like I truly
Mhm.
don't. So is she telling me the truth or is she just trying to get a new cell phone? I don't know. So
Right.
social worker told us, she said, no, absolutely not. She goes, you do not buy anything until I lay my eyes on it and I see that it's broken.
Hmm.
And I appreciated that.
Yeah.
She was
Yeah.
she was protecting us. And she went
Right.
over to Birth Mom's house and looked at that phone, deemed it was broken. She said, okay, she needs a new cell phone. Okay, great. We'll buy a new cell phone. If that's what she needs. We'll buy a new cell phone. Ours was interesting because she was towards the end of the pregnancy. I mean, very end, we're talking the last few weeks. We found out that she did not have a bed, like a little did not have a bed period in her house. She's been sleeping on the floor.
Hmm.
And we asked social worker about that, and she said, yeah, she really, I walked through her house. She does not have a bed. Now we're just getting into common decency. Like, I don't want
Hmm.
my child's mother to be 9 months pregnant and sleeping on a floor. Like,
Hmm.
that's just not, fair.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I spent my entire day that day trying to find a furniture store that would deliver a bed same day. And
Yeah.
I did. I worked the phones and we got her a mattress that day. And she said when that bed got delivered, she was crying. She was 30 something years old and she's never had a bed that's her own
Wow.
in her
Wow.
life.
Hmm.
I mean, this is where you start getting into, like, your adoption's changing lives, not just for these
Hmm.
children, but like, you're changing lives for these families as well.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it just, I mean, she was so overjoyed that she had a bed. It was just, I don't know. I'd never seen anything like that.
Yeah.
It's just not the life I live. And I
Yeah.
don't know. It was just, what a blessing to be able to help her.
For
So
sure. And I'm so glad you said that because I think, like, I know when my husband and I went into it the first time, it was like, we were sort of like eyes on the baby, right? Like that's sort of what you're thinking is like, yeah, you're thinking about like, what's the hospital experience going to be like, or, what's the emotional toll going to feel like, or, what if she changes her mind? Like you have these different thoughts, but then when you do establish this relationship with this person, right? Because baby's not here yet. So the relationship is with the birth mom. When that starts to happen, you're so right. Like, there are so many aspects of both of my children's birth mothers and the relationships that I had and have with them. There are so many different things that has changed my life because of those relationships, having nothing to do with my child. Just different things that they've said to me, or like birth mom telling your wife that she just knew she'd make a great mother. I had a very similar experience with my oldest birth mother, like just those types of things. And then also, like you said, like being able to care for this person who, yes, is caring for your child, but you get to see, like in some cases, not all, you get to see a different world that you're
you
not
do,
you're not
you
used to
do.
seeing. And it is so impactful. If you're a faith-based person, which I know we
Yeah.
are, like it's, I always say adoption is God's work, right?
Oh,
And it's like,
100%.
yeah. So I want to hear more though about like, so did you guys get the phone call that your son had been born, or were you in the room for that? Or let's talk about the birth experience the
Yeah.
first time.
Yeah. I was at my fantasy football draft and we got this call. Okay. Let me back up a little bit because this is part of the issues we had. Birth mom would not go to the doctor, period. They scheduled probably 4 to 5 appointments for her and she skipped out on every single one. They had told us when we signed with her in the beginning that she was due in November. I had no reason to question that. They said she'd been to the doctor in November. Turns out I don't think she actually had. I can't say that. I can't prove that, but I don't think she had. So anyway, what happened is about 2 weeks prior to the birth, now this is in, my son was born on September the 14th. So we're looking at late August at this point, and we're planning for a November birth. And naturally, when your baby, it's coming in November, we're a little behind on buying all the things. So we were going to wait until it got closer to November. Well, she started having Braxton Hicks, and it scared her a little bit. So she went to the ER, which is, I'm so glad she did because she hadn't been to the doctor. Turns out, no, nope, she was like 38 weeks along, and we found out it was a boy. And oh my gosh, we have a lot of stuff to buy, and we could get this call any minute. So our lives completely changed right there. And I was at my fantasy football draft. It was like a Saturday or Sunday night, and it was probably like 7:30. And I get a text from my social worker saying, "Hey, she's gone to the hospital. I don't know if she for sure she's in labor. I'll keep you posted." She called me back about 2 hours later that night and said, "Baby is coming." So I knew. I immediately ran home. I mean, at this point, it's like 9, 10 o'clock in Oklahoma. We're not getting a flight out of here, and I um we basically, all we could do, we had my mother-in-law come over. She was going to take the dogs, and we just, oh yeah, Okay, I gotta back up for a second. This is so fascinating. Um, you know what? I'm getting my birth stories mixed up between both my children. I just realized that.
No worries. No
I
worries.
know, I know. You got two of them, it all blends together. No, on my first one, that was my second one. On my first one, can you hear that noise, by the way? Like if we need to
No,
pause. Okay, there's some people
no.
here. Okay. So on my first one, we got a call at 4 a.m. We just woke up on a Monday morning and my social worker was calling me and saying that baby was coming. And so what we just got on our phones, we booked 2 plane tickets, like the first plane out of OKC to Arizona. We were on the ground by like 9 o'clock Arizona time in the morning. I mean, it was so fast. We just threw everything in a bag and ran out the door. Now my second one, yes, I was at a fantasy football draft and we got the call late at night, so we knew we couldn't fly out that night. So it was pretty chill that night because we knew we couldn't go anywhere. So we just went home, packed our bags, and we were out on the first flight the next morning. So yeah, we were on the ground that morning when we got there. We got to meet birth mom face to face. We got to meet birth father. We met birth mother's dad. And this was for about 5 minutes maybe. Now keep in mind this is 2020. This is the height of COVID. So many restrictions at the hospital that we had to deal with. We were so scared going into because every hospital was different. How they were handling this, and we just didn't know. The hospital there was so wonderful. Um, Technically, I was not supposed to stay the night in the hospital because of COVID. They were not allowing. It was like my wife counted as mom, and I was a guest, but the hospital kind of hid me and just said, "Don't leave the room. Don't leave." Well, no, they said, "Don't leave the floor." And so they let us stay for 2 days, and it was just really it's interesting because once the baby's born and you're with baby, to me there was no different whether we physically had the baby or it's an adoption because at that point it's just all about taking care of the baby, and we're like any first time parent. What are we doing? We have no idea. And so at that point it was just taking care of baby. We were in the hospital for 2 days. We rented an Airbnb and we stayed in Arizona for 10 days. Now, something I do want to say for your listeners that may not know this, but while yes, we clarified every state is different in terms of what you can pay for out of pocket expenses, every state is also different in how long the birth mom has to wait until she can sign her rights. So in the state of Arizona, she cannot sign her rights until 72 hours post birth. So literally meaning if baby's born at 10 a.m., the lawyer then sets an appointment for 10 a.m. 3 days later. And that's where she shows up. So during that 72-hour window is when she can change her mind. Now in Oklahoma, where I live, birth mom can actually, she doesn't have to sign for 2 weeks, meaning you can take baby home from the hospital, love on baby for 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks later, mom changes her mind, and there's nothing you can do. And that's just a part of adoption. There's that window there where you just kind of live in fear a little bit. And that's why we wanted. You can Google it. There's states that have different. I think Florida's a 48-hour window. Arizona's a 72-hour window. We specifically wanted to adopt a baby in a shorter window. That's why we didn't adopt in Oklahoma.
Yeah. And Indiana, which is considered an adoption friendly state, that's where I live, is a 24-hour window. So the meeting the meeting for signature is 24 hours after birth.
I didn't realize it went that short. Okay.
Yeah. We only spent one night in the hospital with my second. And with my first, it was the only reason we stayed 2 nights in the hospital is because we were so stressed. We were like, can we please have another night in the hospital? Like, we need some guidance here. Yeah.
We have no idea what we're doing.
The second time we were like, can we please go home? Like, we don't want to be here any longer.
Oh,
but interestingly, like my youngest was born in 2020, December 1st of 2020. And we had the same exact experience because of COVID. So we had to both like show identification. They let us both in to see the baby. And then my husband was actually supposed to leave, or one of us was supposed to leave. Like, it would only let one of us in at a time. And so we were like, well, what's the other one going to do? Like, go sit in the parking garage, or like, go sit in the hotel room or something. And so luckily we had a nurse. Ironically, the nurse that we had been a birth mother herself. And we had such cool conversations with her during that whole experience. But she was like, okay, stay here, stay on this floor. Don't leave the floor. Like, you can pretty much stay in the room and only leave to go, get water or whatever. She's like, we'll let you stay. But the masking was all there and all that kind of stuff. So, did you ever have any? Oh, go ahead.
I was going to tell you, this is super funny. We were with our first, we were in the hospital for 2 days, and we'd never been to Phoenix. I don't know Phoenix. So I get on Airbnb and I'm like, okay, let's just find a cool Airbnb for, we know we're going to be here for 10 days. So I found this really cute apartment. My wife approved it. I want to put that on the record. She approved it. And we got it. And we left the hospital and we went to the apartment. And as we're driving down the street, we realized that this apartment is student housing for Arizona State University, which is the #1 party school in America. And so we had no other place to go. And so we got some lunch, or I got some Chipotle, and we just like, hey, we're gonna stick it out. So we went in there, and of course we're just surrounded by students, and they're just watching this couple walk in with their baby, kind of giving us this look like, who are these people? And we
Yeah.
walk in, and the place just reeked of smoke. And this was like a beautiful student housing apartment. I'm not gonna lie, it was great, better than any apartment I ever had in college, but it just reeked of smoke. And we were there, we walked in the door, my wife said, "Get me out of here." And so
Mhm.
I called Airbnb, I explained the situation. They were amazing. They actually just said, "You know what? We're gonna avoid this one. We'll get you another one." They were so
Yeah.
wonderful. But it was
Yeah.
just that it was just so funny that we have this baby and we rolled up on student housing at this party
Yeah.
school.
That's
So
hilarious.
what
Yeah.
what what were you gonna ask me? You had a
Well,
question.
even well, just even just hearing you say that, when my first one was born, we stayed at a Residence Inn,
Yeah.
so that we would have like a kitchen and everything. And we were, it ended up working out great because they actually had like nightly meals. Like they would have like burger
Oh,
night. Like you could go pick up a burger. And at that phase of our life where you're like not sleeping and you're highly stressed, you're like, yes, like I don't have to worry
yes. Oh,
about, they
100%.
had 24-hour coffee. Like it was like the best setup. But the
That's
problem
awesome.
was that people obviously go to Residence Inns and they stay long term. Like it's like they'll stay a week or two or
Mhm.
longer. And the people that were directly above us were smoking cigarettes, and the cigarette smoke was coming through our
Oh,
ear vents.
oh,
And they were super loud. So I remember my husband going over like in his pajamas to like the main office at like 2 o'clock in the morning and being like, look, I have a newborn baby. Like we cannot stay in this room. They moved our room at like the middle of the night one night. Like it was crazy. So
wow.
it made me remember that. I hadn't remembered
Yeah.
that in a while. But yeah, so I was curious because I want to make sure we touch on as much as we can, like just I want to hear sort of the story of, your second son, which
Yeah.
like you mentioned at the beginning is the biological brother of your
Mhm.
oldest. But I also want to hear, did you ever feel like there was any hesitation from the birth mother in that 72-hour window? Or
No.
did you feel like it was pretty smooth sailing the whole time? Like everything went pretty smoothly for
It's a
you?
great question. No, we did not have, we never experienced hesitation, but I think the reason why is because we were in what I would call a perfect situation. For us, obviously not for birth mom, but for us, I just want to say that. But the reason is because she had a baby prior to our first, and she had the DHS, or the government entity of that state, took that child away. And because, so they have like a 3 strike system. One is like, one strike is you've tested positive for drugs. Another strike is you have, I think, an arrest record. And the third strike, I know for sure, is that you've lost a baby to the system. And she kind of checked all those strikes. So she actually didn't have a choice on this adoption. It was either you can give the baby up for adoption or the state will take your baby. And because she had a horrible experience losing her other child to the state, she's like, I am not going through that again. So
Yeah.
no, we really weren't worried about it because we knew there
Mhm.
wasn't a choice there. Um, the second one is the second one was just all the drama. This is where, like, I'm gonna scare people, I know. But essentially what happened with the second one is she told us she was pregnant, and the social worker, we had the same social worker, same lawyer, everybody's on the same page. Like, cool, this is gonna be super easy. We've done this before. Um, should be way easier than the first one. The problem was there was an adoption consultant that tried to get in the middle of it and basically reached out to our birth mom and said, I will find you a couple that will give you more money than Brad and Kelsey will. And we're giving what the court deems appropriate. So we're above board on what we're doing. So when someone offered that, so that to our birth, and our birth mom told our social worker that, she kept the text and everything. In my head, I'm thinking, this is like human trafficking now. Like you're literally trying to sell a baby to the highest bidder. So I called up my federal senator and talked to his office, and they immediately called the governor's office of the state where this consultant was, and the attorney general of that state got involved very
Wow.
quickly. and the consultant backed off extremely fast, and we never dealt with her again. uh I just, that's when I saw the seedy underside of adoption in the United States, that
Mhm.
there are great consultants and there's bad consultants, just like there's good agencies and there's bad agencies, but there are people out there that are trying to make money off of this.
Yeah.
And you just have to, you have to be aware, and you have to be vigilant and protective. And I was going to do whatever I could to protect that child.
Mhm.
And yeah, in fact, I saw that sit under the other day, in fact, just like 2 days ago, on Sunday. And I said thank you so much for helping us with this adoption. He was blown away by it, by everything that happened. But it was such a sad experience to know that that stuff happens. And our birth mom never flinched. She basically told that consultant, like, hey, go away, leave me alone. Like,
Mhm.
no, I know Brad and Kelsey. That's the thing, is like, she had a relationship with us, she loved us, we had first baby, we stay in contact with her regularly. She doesn't
Yeah.
want to give the baby to someone else because she doesn't know who these people are. And so she wanted to go with us, she didn't care about the money. um
Mhm.
it was just, it was such a bizarre experience. And so anyway, our second was born. It was kind of the same deal. Like, she wouldn't go to the doctor. Some things just don't change. She wouldn't go to the doctor. We thought he was early too, but nope, he was right on track. He was born September 2021. And so yeah, fast forward, now I've got a 2-year-old and a 1-year old. And that one, once that consultant was out of the way, it was smooth sailing after that.
Yeah.
And this was
This is
pretty early. That was the only hiccup. Like, and that's the
Yep.
thing. We already knew birth mom. We've been through this. We knew, like, kind of about her and her family situation. So honestly, after that, it was just smooth sailing. It's just that
Yeah.
period of waiting, which every adopted couple hates, is just, you're just waiting on baby to get here, and you
Right.
just, it's just awkward. But I was gonna say, if you want me to, I'd be happy to touch on fundraising, because we did a lot of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And that's actually where I wanted to wrap up. But before we get there, I want to
Yeah.
ask you, because I want to make sure our listeners know, we mentioned it at the beginning, that you're a transracial family.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So Brad
Mhm.
and Kelsey are Caucasian,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
both of their boys are African American. And so I want to speak to that for a moment. Just your experience with that so far. Obviously, they're young, so
Yeah.
their interpretation is not quite to the point of understanding. But
Sure.
what types of things have you experienced so far with that?
So our boys are half African American and half Hispanic. And so now my oldest, so mom's Hispanic and dad's African American. Mom is a very, very light Hispanic. My wife is Native American, like literally barely enough Native American at all, but she's Native American nonetheless. Birth mom is lighter than my wife. Like, you wouldn't know, honestly. So my oldest son takes after her, and he's very light skinned, very, very light skinned. He's got like a Hispanic, you could tell he's Hispanic. But then my youngest takes after dad, and he's very dark African American. But what's interesting is he has like a straight wavy baby hair, so everyone keeps asking us if he's Indian, because of the hair. And you know like you said, I mean, they're 2 and 1, they don't know. um we haven't really experienced anything, like nobody has said anything to us like, oh my gosh, you have, you know like, kids that aren't your race. No one's batted an eye at it. I've just been personally on a personal journey trying to find resources to help, because I know those days are coming where they're going to say, the boys are going to ask why we're a different color than they are. They're going to experience some kids going to pop off and say something at some point. So personally, as a parent, I just want to prepare myself. And so I've reached out to different African American men that I know to see if they would be a resource for me, and my children as they get older. It's like, because I mean, I can't speak to a lot of the issues that they're going to experience, because I didn't grow up it that way. But I want to make sure that I have people in their lives that I trust, that they can trust, that will help guide them through that. So
Yeah.
all that to say is, I'm trying to educate myself, and I want to place mentors in my kids' life of that shares their race that can help them.
Yep. And that was actually going to be exactly where I was going to take you, was like one of the biggest things that's been impactful for us, especially now having a 6-year-old who can communicate, differences that she feels or things that people are saying to her or whatever. One of the biggest things that has made the biggest impact for us is having those outside mentors, like people who are just grown adults who, I mean, actually one of our closest friends in this regard is a biracial, 40 something who was born in a adopted family. I mean, she was adopted at birth, and both of her parents were Caucasian. So it's almost the same story as both of my girls. And so having that has been great, because whether it's something logistical like fixing hair or braiding hair when you've got two girls, right? Or if it's something more where I'm sure as my daughter gets older, if there's something that emotionally impacts her, to have somebody that she can go to who understands when I might not. So I think that's the biggest thing. Like there's there's books and podcasts and all kinds of things that you can do that help. But I said this on my interview with Andra as well. The best advice we ever got was seek mentors of other races and surround yourself with all different types of people. And then also like be willing to show up in a room where you are the minority.
Yep.
And that's been really big for us too. So I wanted to make sure we touched on that.
We did
Yeah.
the only thing we experienced is my grandfather. He's 90 and he has dementia. And I took the boys to meet him, and he, in all seriousness, he was just like, Brad, like they look exactly like you. I was like, I don't think that's possible. But
Yeah,
sure, Grandpa.
yeah.
But that's like the only thing we've experienced. I've done a lot of research and stuff on. I even asked our hairdresser, because my boys don't have the African American hair texture. I was like, I don't know, like, does that show up right away, or does that come at birth? And I Googled it, and it said it could show up anywhere between birth and 4 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked my
Mhm.
hairdresser that, and she said, yeah, she said their hair texture will probably change multiple times.
So many
in the first
times.
year.
So many times. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I'm anticipating that coming, but I'm excited about it, honestly. I think it's gonna be a lot of
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. Well, I do want to touch on, the topic of fundraising, because I know
Yeah.
obviously an 8-year infertility journey in vitro is not for the faint of heart.
No.
And I think a lot of times the biggest objection, at least that I hear, probably is either between, am I going to be able to afford this? What is this cost going to look like? I either hear that, or it comes back to questions that lead me to believe that the person feels underprepared emotionally. So
Yeah.
it's either this emotional underpreparedness, or it's, the cost. So I want to make sure that we touch on that, because I know that you guys did do some fundraising things to help pay for the adoption. So if you could share that with us, that'd be
Yeah.
super.
And so I don't know how much you've talked about this on previous episodes, but you can Google this. What is the average cost of domestic adoption in the United States? If you Google it right now, it's going to say $45,000. Um, our finding was that was correct on both adoptions. We saved a little bit on the second one because we working with the same birth mother, and there were some things we were able to cut the second time around because we've already gone down that road before with the same birth mom. His ended up being probably like 37. So I mean, it wasn't like we cut a lot. So as you can imagine, I adopted twice in a 12-month period, and the total of those adoptions was close to $90,000. Now, most people can't afford one, let alone two. I couldn't have paid that outright for sure. So my wife and I leaned in adoption. I have a background in marketing. So what we did is we decided I designed a website. It's no longer up, but I designed a website at the time. It was called bradandkelseyAdopt.com. And it just kind of laid out what we were dealing with, 8 years of infertility. And now we're matched with a birth mom. And we had different options. So basically what we did is everyone thought this idea was so unique. I don't know. I've never seen it before, but what we did is we designed a jigsaw puzzle, and you could buy a piece for $25, and your name or whatever message you want to give goes on the back of that piece. So then we put the puzzle together, and it's framed above each of my son's beds. And on the back of that puzzle, which obviously they'll find out as they get older, is the names of all the people that helped donate to their adoption. We wanted to make sure that those people, that their names were remembered. And we did a garage sale where we had a bunch of people from our church donate items, and we did a garage sale. But what's interesting about fundraising for adoption is this is one of the beautiful highs of adoption, is seeing the giving spirit of others. It was incredible. Like, I can't tell you how many times I was moved to tears because people I don't even know. For instance, I'll give you an example. At the garage sale, we had a sign out by the road saying adoption garage sale, and told you where to go. And this lady pulls up in a van. She walks up to my wife, hands her a check for like $500. And we don't know this person. And my wife said, well, are you wanting to shop at the garage sale? Do you want an item? She's like, nope, just saw the sign and wanted to help. $500. Are you kidding me? Like, that's insane. I had a friend of mine, a young friend in their 20s. And when I was in my 20s, I was pretty darn poor, not gonna lie. A friend in my 20s gave me a check for $3,000. $3,000. And I said, I actually said, I cannot accept this. Like, I know you're in your 20s. I know how tight finance can be in your 20s. And he's like, no, my wife and I save for things like this. I mean, I didn't do that in my 20s. It just, oh my gosh, I was moved to tears so many times. We ended up raising on, so the first adoption cost right about $45,000. Fundraising, we raised over 20,000, maybe like 22, $23,000, which is a big help. And then we actually had family aside from that. Outside of the fundraising, we had like her parents donated money, my parents donated money, we had grandparents that donated money. I can honestly say that on my first adoption, I don't know that I spent a penny of my own money. And so it can be done. Like, you totally can. I mean, people, that's the thing, is you have to realize people want to help. Give people the opportunity to bless you. Like, don't deny them that. And on my second one, like, honestly, with the second one, like being so like shortly right after the first one, I did not expect to raise that much money because people just donated a lot of money to the first one. But again, in fact, my wife was against fundraising on the second one because of that. She's like, Brad, we cannot turn around and do this again and ask people for money. And I said, do not deny people the opportunity to bless you. People want to bless you. Just give them the chance. So I redid the website, still bradandkelseyAdopt.com, just changed the story on it. We did a different puzzle. And on this one, like on the first one, we raised a little over 22, 23. On this one, we raised probably like 15, like, which is incredible. And again, we had family that wanted to help. I spent a little bit out of pocket on that one, but I would say in the grand scheme, out of a $90,000 adoption in 1 year, out of my own pocket for the cost of it, I probably spent less than 7, which is
That's
incredible.
amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
But I think the most powerful thing that you have to say with this is that people want to help. And that
yes.
people, I mean, you know, we see it every day, like on social media where what's the website? I can't think off the top of my head, like the GoFundMe's and things
Oh
that are
yeah, yeah,
created for people who are suffering from cancer or people who've been in an
yeah.
accident. And sometimes it blows me away. Like sometimes I click on those to donate myself or whatever, and you see that they've exceeded their goal, right?
Mhm.
Like I see that so much, and it's because people really do want to help. And this is a topic that I cover more in depth in an interview with Anna Fulmer, but I think regardless of whether it's domestic adoption or international adoption, like the cost, there's a price tag, right? There's a price tag
Mhm.
associated. And a lot of times it does come down to, yes, you know, the attorney fees are pretty staple, like
Yep.
whatever attorney you're going to go with, they can give you an idea of what that cost is going to be. What you don't know is the birth mother expenses. You don't know
Yep.
what that's going to look like because you don't know what state they're going to be in. You don't know what those
Right.
caps are, which we've already talked about, right? So
Yeah.
like my first adoption with my oldest, drastically less costs than the adoption with my second.
Mhm.
A lot of that has to do with, are you paying the agency for marketing? Are you doing your own marketing? Like
Yep.
there's so many different pieces. And so don't let the number scare you. But just be aware that like, if it does come to, you know, to this point where you're like, I feel called to do this and adoption is something that I want to pursue, people are out there wanting to help. Right.
People wanna help.
And a lot of times it's like, yes, you want their name on the back of that jigsaw puzzle, but a lot of people will give you, the money because they just want to help regardless
Yep.
of whether their name's on that jigsaw puzzle. So
Yep.
I just think that's something that needs to be said because I hear it so often where, you know, I know in our situation, we didn't do IVF. So we did some like basic injections to help me ovulate and things like
Yeah.
that. But it was messing with my migraines. It was messing with my issues that I was already having health wise. And so when it came to the point where the doctor said, hey, look, in vitro is the next step, that also has a price tag, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
there's no guarantee, not that there's a guarantee with adoption either, but for us, we got to a point where it was like, you know, is it worth my health to have issues potentially with the in vitro route? And also, if we spend money this way, will we have the money to invest later if we decide to pursue adoption?
Yeah.
So the money piece is so big, and it is something that a lot of people are concerned about. I wish there was more to be done because there's obviously a need for adoption, right? There's a need for it domestically. And sometimes I feel like, what are all these barriers and hoops? Like, why are there so many
Yep.
hoops when it should be made so much easier. My husband and I joke sometimes, like when you do a domestic adoption, part of your home study process is being fingerprinted and doing like a urine drug analysis, but yet anybody can walk into an emergency department and deliver a baby, and there's no urine analysis, there's no there's no fingerprinting, there's none of
Nope.
that. So sometimes, and I don't want to say, because there's obviously so many different angles of adoption,
Right.
but sometimes you can feel like, as the adoptive couple, you can feel like, gosh, like people are coming, like you, I mean, I can't believe the beginning of your story. I kind of had forgotten about that when you first told me about like the dog biting the lady and all the different things that happened. Like
Yeah.
when you think about it though, like someone's coming in. I mean, we had somebody that came in to look like, are our outlets, are our electrical outlets covered? Do we have a fence in our backyard? Is there access to water? If there is access to water, are there life jackets? Like there are so many things that are assessed, and you can't help but think like, are they attacking me? Right? Like
I know.
this doesn't happen for anyone else. So there's so many different things. And I mean, there's honestly, when we were thinking about doing this feature for the month of November, my husband was like, how are you going to fit everything people need to know into 1 month? And I was like, I know, I almost feel like I could do an episode a day and just cover something different every day. But what I love about what you had to say when it comes to fundraising is, yes, there are logistical pieces that can make you afraid, that can scare you. There are unknowns, but there's also like, if you can just believe that adoption is God's work, that love makes a family, that you're called to this, and you feel like, regardless of what other people might say, that you would make a great mother, or, or your spouse would make a great father or whatever. Like, if you feel like this is on your heart, there will be a way. And, finding help from others through fundraising is a great way to make it happen. So any final thoughts before we wrap it up today? Anything that you didn't say that you wish you would have said?
I was just thinking through that. Is there anything I didn't say? I can't think of anything. I would just, if you want to put my email in there, you're more than welcome to. Like, if people have questions, there's so many logistics to fundraising and making sure you do it right, that I would love to help with. In the whole last year, you've seen all the news about Roe v. Wade, and that's a political discussion I'm not going to get into. But at the end of the day, all I could think with that is, okay, regardless of whether the government's going to provide these services or whatnot, they have to lower the barrier to entry to adoption, because at the end of the day, regardless, there's still babies that need adopted and families that want to adopt but physically or financially feel like they just can't do it. That's the barrier we've got to get over. Because I don't know if we're ever going to be able to lower the cost to adoption. I think there's too many players in it right now, personally. But there's ways like we can educate people on how to do fundraising, how to do it right. If people have questions, I'd love to help. So if you can send them you can put my email address in the show notes. I'm happy to help. And
Okay.
we've consulted with several couples already, just asking. They've asked a lot of fundraising questions. It was interesting. We went trick-or-treating last night with the boys, and there was a family that was sitting out in the driveway of this house with a little newborn baby and a carrier. And we started talking to him, and I was like, oh yeah, our boys are adopted. Oh, they're like, wait, your boys are adopted? Yeah. They said, well, that's why we're here. We're from Virginia, and we came here to adopt our baby boy. And so they were staying in an Airbnb in our neighborhood, and they were just waiting on ICPC clearance. And when they met another couple that had been through that, oh my gosh, the look on their faces, they were just like, oh my gosh, they had so many questions, which is fantastic. So they're 3 houses down from us, and they're here for another 10 days. So our Bible study group is coming together to bless them with some baby gifts and Target gift cards, and helping where we can. And so I love to help other adoptive couples. We need each other. I don't know if we'll adopt again. I would say probably not, just because two's enough. Our birth mom actually did give birth again.
Wow.
In September of this year, she gave birth
Oh,
again.
wow.
Yep. And she didn't ask. She decided to keep this one. I think there was some rules now like that would allow her to do it. So she took advantage of that, and so she's raising the baby, and which is great. And she's texted us and about it, but yeah, adoption's a beautiful thing, and it's such a blessing.
It is. Yeah. There's so much joy to come from adoption. So
there is.
I'm so grateful that you've shared your time with us today and your stories. And I always love connecting with you. So I'll make sure to put your email and everything in the show notes for people if they do want to contact you with any questions. But Thank you so much for being here and for being willing to share. I know it's,
Absolutely.
even for me, sometimes like you experience it, but then when you retell it, it's like you almost are re-experiencing it all over again, right? But
100%.
even though there's pieces of, there's, always there's sadness and there's, different emotions involved. For me, it always just, there's nothing quite like it, right? There's nothing quite like the feeling of raising a child through adoption. So blessed to know you, my friend. Thank you so much
Yeah,
for being
thank
on
you.
here. We'll talk
Thank you for
soon.
having me. Yep.